The real power move in the luxury car world is not always the badge everyone recognizes first. It is not always the loudest grille, the most famous hood ornament, or the brand name that instantly tells the valet what kind of money just arrived. Sometimes the highest status symbol is quieter, more coded, more discreet. And that is exactly why Maybach sits in such a strange place today. Because to most people, a Rolls-Royce is the obvious answer when you ask what the ultimate luxury car is. But to a certain kind of millionaire, the person who already knows what the obvious answer is, Maybach offers something different. It offers the comfort of Mercedes, the history of one of the earliest automotive geniuses, and the kind of rear-seat luxury that does not need to shout across the parking lot to prove a point. But the wild part is this. Maybach did not begin as a rich person's toy. It did not begin as a stretched S-Class with pillow cushions and champagne coolers. It began in a German workshop, before cars even really existed, with an engineer whose hands helped shape the entire automobile industry. The name Maybach is now stitched into some of the most expensive seats Mercedes makes, but the story behind it reaches back to engine sketches, airship power plants, royal limousines, wartime ruins, 60 years of silence, one failed comeback, and then one of the smartest luxury rebrands in modern automotive history. To understand why millionaires choose Maybach over Rolls-Royce, you have to go much deeper than leather, legroom, and two-tone paint. You have to go back to the beginning, before Mercedes was Mercedes, before the three-pointed star became a global symbol, and before the car itself became normal. Picture Germany in the 1880s. There is no modern traffic, no highways, no luxury sedans gliding through city streets. Just workshops, machinery, oil, wood, metal, and a handful of men trying to solve a problem that sounded almost impossible at the time. How do you build an engine small enough and light enough to move a vehicle, but powerful enough to make that vehicle useful? In that world, Gottlieb Daimler had the vision, the ambition, and the business instinct. But beside him was Wilhelm Maybach, the engineer who could turn an idea into a working machine. Daimler's name became famous. It became corporate history. It became part of the foundation of Mercedes. But Maybach was not just standing in the background passing tools. He was the technical force, the problem solver, the man who understood how theory had to become metal. In 1885, Daimler and Maybach built the first Daimler engine, and that engine helped power one of the earliest motorcycles in history. A year later, a version of that engine was fitted into a carriage, and suddenly the shape of the automobile future became visible. Maybach kept improving the engine, refining it, making it more practical, and one of his major breakthroughs was the spray nozzle carburetor, a device that mixed fuel and air far more effectively than earlier systems. That mattered because early engines were not just about power. They were about reliability, drivability, and whether this strange new invention could become something people could actually use on roads. Maybach was solving those problems before most of the world understood there was a market waiting on the other side. By 1900, after Daimler's death, Maybach had become chief designer at Daimler Motor Gesellschaft, the company that would eventually become part of Mercedes-Benz. And then comes one of the most important details in the whole story. The first car to carry the Mercedes name, the 1901 Mercedes 35 horsepower, was developed under Maybach's direction. So the man whose name now marks the top level of Mercedes luxury also helped create the car that gave Mercedes its identity in the first place. That is not just trivia. That is the foundation of the brand itself. But Maybach's story did not stay inside Daimler forever. In 1907, after disagreements over the direction of the company, Wilhelm Maybach left, and instead of fading into retirement, he moved into one of the most demanding engineering arenas of the era. Airships. Together with his son Karl, Maybach began building engines for Zeppelins, those massive flying symbols of German engineering ambition. And this was not simple work. Airship engines had to be powerful, but they also had to be light, because every extra pound affected lift, range, and performance. The Maybach name became tied to precision under pressure, to engines that had to function in conditions where failure was not just inconvenient, but catastrophic. This period is crucial, because it shows what Maybach really meant before it became a luxury badge. It meant engineering seriousness. It meant solving hard mechanical problems. It meant building machines for people who demanded the absolute limit of what was possible. Then World War I ended, and the Treaty of Versailles changed everything. Germany faced heavy restrictions on airship and aircraft production, which meant the Maybach family business had to rethink its future. Karl Maybach looked at the company's engine expertise and made a bold pivot. If they could not keep building for the sky at the same scale, they would build for the road, not ordinary cars, not simple transportation, the finest cars they could possibly make. In 1921, Maybach introduced its first car, the W3. It was the beginning of Maybach as a luxury automobile company, but the legend really hardened in the years that followed, especially with the Maybach Zeppelin of the early 1930s. This car was not subtle by the standards of its time. It was huge, technically advanced, and built around a massive V12 engine, which was an almost outrageous feature in that era. It also used a complex dual overdrive transmission known as the double overdrive system, allowing the car to cruise smoothly at higher speeds while still remaining manageable in slower traffic. Remember, this was decades before modern automatic transmissions made smooth driving feel normal. Maybach was already thinking about effortless motion, about reducing stress, about making a large luxury car feel refined in situations where most machines still felt mechanical and crude. That is the key. Maybach was not simply decorating cars with expensive materials. It was engineering ease. It was engineering silence. It was engineering superiority. And the people buying these cars were not just wealthy. They were royalty, industrialists, heads of state, and the kind of elites who did not need a car as much as they needed a moving statement of position. Bodies were hand-built. Interiors were customized. Coachwork could be tailored to the owner's taste. A Maybach in the 1930s was not just transportation. It was a rolling room for the upper edge of society. Fewer than 2,000 Maybach cars were produced in that entire pre-war luxury era, which made them rare even then. But history does not care how exclusive your customer list is. World War II arrived, and Maybach, like many German manufacturers, shifted into military production, building engines for tanks and other vehicles instead of luxury cars. By the time the war ended, the factory in Friedrichshafen was devastated. The infrastructure that had supported airship engines and royal-level automobiles was broken. Karl Maybach faced a brutal reality. Rebuilding a luxury car company from ruins in a country recovering from war was almost impossible. So Maybach left passenger cars behind and moved into diesel engines for trains, trucks, ships, and industrial machines. And just like that, one of the most prestigious car names in Europe went silent. This is the part many people miss. Maybach did not simply lose popularity. Maybach cars basically disappeared for 6 decades. The name continued, but not in the world of limousines, chauffeurs, and hand-finished cabins. It lived in heavy machinery, in industrial power, in diesel engines built for serious work, not social status. In 1960, Maybach Motorenbau became part of Daimler-Benz, which put the name back under the same corporate roof as Mercedes. But Mercedes did not immediately revive it as a car brand. The name sat there, valuable but unused, like a crown locked in a cabinet. Through the 1970s and 1980s, most car fans would not have thought of Maybach as a living luxury manufacturer. If they knew it at all, they knew it as history or as an engine maker. And that silence matters because luxury is built on memory. The longer Maybach stayed dormant, the more mysterious it became, but also the more difficult it became to explain to modern buyers. Mercedes had a legendary name in its portfolio, but the question was dangerous. How do you bring back a brand that once stood above almost everything when the people with money now already worship Rolls-Royce and Bentley? In the early 2000s, Mercedes decided to try. Rolls-Royce and Bentley were dominating the ultra-luxury space. And although the Mercedes S-Class was already one of the best luxury sedans in the world, it did not live in the same emotional category as a Rolls-Royce Phantom. An S-Class said success, a Phantom said dynasty. Mercedes wanted a car that could sit in that rarefied air, so in 2002, it revived Maybach as a separate ultra-luxury brand. No Mercedes badge, no three-pointed star as the main identity, just Maybach, standing on its own. The company launched the Maybach 57 and the Maybach 62, with the numbers referring to their length in decimeters. These cars were enormous, quiet, and overflowing with features: reclining rear seats, individual climate zones, champagne coolers, incredible ride refinement. Engineers reportedly went to extreme lengths to reduce vibration, even balancing tires down to tiny fractions of a gram. Prices started around $300,000 and could climb far higher with customization. On paper, this should have been a perfect return. A legendary dormant name, Mercedes engineering, ultra-luxury pricing, a market full of billionaires, celebrities, executives, and royals. But luxury is never only about what is on paper. Luxury is perception, and this is where Maybach ran into the wall. Buyers at that level already knew what Rolls-Royce meant. They knew what Bentley meant. Rolls-Royce had more than a century of prestige, royal associations, and an identity so clear that the car did not need explaining. Bentley had old-money craftsmanship mixed with motorsport heritage and British character. Maybach had history, But the modern version did not feel independent enough to many of the people Mercedes needed to impress. To some buyers, it looked like an extremely expensive Mercedes that had been stretched, softened, and dressed up. The platform connection to the S-Class, even though heavily modified, became a problem because in ultra-luxury circles, rumors travel faster than spec sheets. When someone spends $400,000 on a car, they are not just buying comfort. They are buying the feeling that nobody can accuse them of choosing the cheaper substitute. And that is the one thing the standalone Maybach could not fully escape. Mercedes expected roughly 2,000 sales a year. Some years, Maybach sold only around 200 cars worldwide. That gap between ambition and reality was brutal. By 2011, Mercedes announced the standalone Maybach brand would be discontinued, and by 2013 production ended. After 60 years of silence, Maybach had returned for an 11-year experiment and failed again. But this is where the second resurrection becomes more interesting than the first. Mercedes did not throw away the name. It studied the failure and realized the mistake was not the idea of Maybach luxury. The mistake was trying to make Maybach fight Mercedes instead of using Mercedes as its strength. In 2015, Maybach returned again, but this time as Mercedes-Maybach, not a totally separate company, not an awkward Rolls-Royce rival pretending it had never been connected to the S-Class. Instead, Maybach became the highest luxury expression of Mercedes itself. Think of it the way AMG represents performance. AMG takes Mercedes engineering and pushes it towards speed, drama, and aggression. Maybach takes Mercedes engineering and pushes it towards silence, space, comfort, and status. That change was brilliant because it solved the identity problem. Buyers no longer had to ask whether the car was secretly a Mercedes. Of course it was a Mercedes. That was the point. It was the most luxurious Mercedes you could buy, the most stretched, the most refined, the most indulgent. And suddenly the platform sharing that hurt the standalone brand became an advantage. Mercedes could build Maybach versions profitably on existing architecture, while customers could enjoy the reliability, technology, and recognition of Mercedes with a higher level of exclusivity layered on top. This also matched the modern ultra-wealthy buyer better. Not every millionaire wants the theatrical presence of a Rolls-Royce. Some want something quieter, something that can glide into a hotel entrance without becoming the entire event. Some want to be chauffeured in total comfort while still sitting behind a badge that every person on earth understands. That is where Mercedes-Maybach found its lane. It became less about replacing Rolls-Royce and more about offering a different kind of power, more discreet, more executive, more connected to the world of global business than old-world royalty. And the strategy worked, especially in markets like China and the Middle East, where long-wheelbase luxury sedans and rear-seat comfort are extremely important. Mercedes expanded the idea beyond the S-Class. The Maybach GLS brought that treatment into the SUV world, giving wealthy families and chauffeured clients a taller, more versatile version of the same philosophy. Then came the Mercedes-Maybach EQS SUV, showing that the name was not going to remain locked in the gasoline past. So what actually makes a modern Maybach different from a regular Mercedes? The answer starts with space. A Mercedes-Maybach S-Class uses a stretched wheelbase, and most of that extra length is dedicated to the rear cabin. The back seat is not treated like an afterthought. It is treated like the main product. The seats recline farther. The right rear passenger can often extend into a near first-class position, with the front passenger seat moving forward to create more legroom. This is not a car designed around the driver's ego. It is designed around the person being driven. Then comes silence. Maybach models receive additional sound insulation, thicker acoustic glass, more sealing around the cabin, and extra damping throughout the body. The goal is not simply to be quiet for a car. The goal is to make the rear cabin feel like a private room moving through the city. That difference sounds small until you understand who these cars are for. If someone spends their day in meetings, flights, calls, and negotiations, the ability to sit in the back of a car and speak softly while the outside world disappears is not a gimmick. It is a luxury. Materials push the separation even further. A high-end S-Class already has beautiful leather, wood, lighting, and technology. Maybach takes those same ingredients and turns the volume up. More exclusive leather patterns, more detailed stitching, richer wood finishes, illuminated Maybach badges, special color combinations. Two-tone paint options, details that exist not because they change how the car drives, but because they change how the car feels the second you step inside. Ride quality is also tuned around a different mission. AMG wants sharpness and emotion. A regular S-Class balances comfort with control. Maybach chases the sensation of floating. The suspension calibration, damping, and overall setup are aimed at smoothing out broken pavement, isolating the passenger, and making the car feel effortless. That is why Maybach makes sense for some millionaires in a way Rolls-Royce does not. Rolls-Royce is theater. Maybach is sanctuary. Rolls-Royce announces wealth with ceremony. Maybach hides it inside the most complete version of a Mercedes. And for people who already own several cars, that distinction matters. They may have the Ferrari for attention, the Porsche for driving, the Range Rover for daily use, and the Rolls-Royce for maximum arrival. But the Maybach becomes the car for moving through the world without making every journey a performance. It gives them luxury without the same level of spectacle. It gives them status without needing to explain itself too loudly. And it carries a story that runs all the way back to the man who helped create the first Mercedes. That is what makes the badge so unusual. Wilhelm Maybach helped shape the engine age, helped define Mercedes before Mercedes became a global empire, moved into airships, inspired some of the most exclusive cars of the 1930s, disappeared into industrial engines for 60 years, failed as a standalone revival, and then returned as the crown jewel of the Mercedes lineup. Most brands do not survive one collapse. Maybach survived several transformations and somehow came out more relevant because of them. So when a millionaire chooses Maybach over Rolls-Royce, it is not always because they think it is objectively more prestigious in the traditional sense. It is because it solves a different problem. It offers maximum comfort with less drama. It offers Mercedes technology with a level of craftsmanship that feels private and rare. It offers old engineering heritage without forcing the owner into the costume of old aristocracy. And that might be the real secret. Rolls-Royce is for being seen. Maybach is for being understood by the people who know exactly what it is. From a wooden bench in the 1880s to Zeppelin engines, royal limousines, wartime ruins, diesel machines, failed rebirth, and modern chauffeur suites, Maybach has never been just another trim level. It is the quiet reminder that sometimes the deepest luxury story is not the one with the loudest badge. It is the one that had to disappear, fail, and reinvent itself before becoming powerful enough to sit above Mercedes itself. And if that hidden history changes the way you look at the badge, then the next time a Maybach glides past, you will not just see an expensive S-Class. You will see a century of ambition moving silently through traffic.